The scent of roasted coffee beans and damp earth permeated the diner. Jessie sat at the counter this time, staring into the swirling black depths of his morning drip. The silver bell above the door remained silent, leaving the low hum of the refrigerators as the only accompaniment to the steady drumming of rain against the glass. He had been in Gimli for 8 days now. The isolation had worked its intended magic, pulling the suffocating sting of betrayal from his chest and replacing it with a hollow, echoing quiet. But quiet didn't pay for groceries, and it certainly wouldn't cover the rent for his small cabin indefinitely. He traced the rim of his ceramic mug, feeling the chipped edge under his thumb. The town was small, insulated against outsiders, and he knew practically nothing about the local economy. Beyond the fishing boats at the harbor and a handful of seasonal tourist traps currently shuttered against the autumn chill, he had no idea where a guy with his fractured background could secure a paycheck. Mrs. Henderson stood a few feet away, meticulously arranging packets of sugar and synthetic sweetener into an acrylic tray. Her maroon and yellow uniform remained impeccably pressed despite the dreary weather. Jessie watched her capable hands for a moment, gathering the courage to bridge the gap. He cleared his throat softly. "Excuse me, Mrs. Henderson." She didn't startle, simply placed the last sugar packet into its slot before turning her calm, assessing gaze upon him. The tight bun pulling at her scalp seemed to emphasize the sharp maternal wisdom in her eyes. "Coffee too cold, Jessie." "No, the coffee is perfect," he replied, offering a self-deprecating smile. "I was actually wondering if you might know of anyone in town looking for help. A job, I mean. I've got 2 hands, I don't mind heavy lifting, and I'm not afraid of early hours. I need to find something if I'm going to stay out here." Mrs. Henderson picked up a damp cloth and began wiping down the already pristine Formica counter. She moved with deliberate, sweeping motions, her eyes flicking toward the empty back booths before returning to Jessie. She seemed to be weighing him on some invisible, internal scale. He held his breath, suddenly feeling like a teenager awaiting a verdict. "You handled yourself well yesterday," she said finally, her voice low enough that it wouldn't carry past the stools. Jessie blinked, momentarily thrown by the sudden shift in topic. I didn't want to crowd her. She was already so defensive. I know what it feels like to expect the worst from people." "Most folks don't understand Kira," Mrs. Henderson continued, folding the cloth into a perfect square. "They see the anxiety, the rigidity, and they get impatient. Or worse, they get patronizing. I've had to chase more than a few summer tourists out of here for staring or making snide remarks when she misses a social cue." She leaned forward slightly, resting her forearms against the counter. "I've been keeping an eye on you since you started nursing that dark roast in the back. You don't push. You listen. That's a rare trait in young men these days." Jessie looked down at his hands, feeling a flush of genuine humility. "I don't know about that. I just think everybody deserves a little respect, especially someone trying that hard to navigate a world that doesn't make sense to them." Mrs. Henderson nodded, apparently satisfied with his answer. "We're short-staffed here at Robbins, have been since the end of August. I need someone to help keep the tables turned over, manage the trash, and run the dishwasher." She paused, her expression softening into something deeply compassionate. "But mostly, I need someone who can work alongside Kira without setting off her alarms." Jessie sat up straighter, the prospect of a steady rhythm suddenly very appealing. "You want me to work here?" "I'm offering you the apron," she confirmed. "It's not glamorous. Minimum wage plus whatever tips the fishermen leave behind. But part of the job description would be looking out for her. Kira's routine is solid 99% of the time. But when the diner gets too loud, or if someone alters her cleaning sequence, she can spiral into a panic episode. It's very rare, but when it happens, she needs someone to step in, cover her station, and give her the space to reset without making a scene about it." Jessie thought of the girl in the oversized green sweater, clutching her canvas tote bag like a shield against the unpredictable variables of human behavior. He remembered the raw honesty in her voice when she dissected her survival mechanisms. The idea of protecting that fragile equilibrium didn't feel like a burden. It felt like an anchor. He needed something outside of his own head to care about, a purpose that demanded gentleness instead of the guarded paranoia his ex had left him with. "She's incredibly observant," Jessie murmured, half to himself. "But she seems so easily startled by everything around her, like a rare deer in the woods. You step on a twig and she's ready to bolt." A warm, rich laugh broke from Mrs. Henderson's chest, echoing pleasantly in the empty diner. It was a surprising sound, full of hidden knowledge. "A deer, you say?" Jessie smiled, slightly embarrassed. "Well, yes, she just seems very vulnerable." Mrs. Henderson reached out and gave his forearm an affectionate, knowing pat. "She's vulnerable, certainly, and she's had to build a lot of walls to survive the ignorance of others. But don't mistake her anxiety for weakness, Jessie. With the right conditions, that girl is a tiger." The comparison caught him entirely off guard, sparking a deep, genuine curiosity. A tiger. He tried to reconcile the image of the frantic, humming girl tracing invisible patterns on the table with the fierce, unyielding strength of an apex predator. It made him wonder what Kira looked like when she wasn't on the defensive, when she felt entirely secure in her environment. "I'll take the job," Jessie said, his voice firm and certain. "If you'll have me, I'll take it, and I'll make sure her routines stay exactly the way she needs them to be." "Good," Mrs. Henderson said, turning back toward the kitchen doors. "You start tomorrow at 6 in the morning. Wear comfortable shoes. And Jessie." He looked up from his coffee. "Yes, ma'am." "Don't try to force conversation with her. Let her set the pace." "I wouldn't dream of it," he replied. As Mrs. Henderson disappeared into the back to fetch his uniform, Jessie turned his gaze toward the front window. The rain was finally beginning to let up, leaving the streets of Gimli slick and shimmering under the breaking gray clouds. He took a slow, deep breath, feeling the heavy, suffocating weight of his past loosen another fraction. For the first time in months, he wasn't just surviving the day, he was actually looking forward to the next one. Kira's alarm blares at 5:30. She slaps the snooze button once, breathing in the familiar scent of lavender detergent. Reaching for her phone, she cues up her morning playlist. The upbeat piano chords of "Hold It In" by Jukebox the Ghost fill her bedroom. The tempo is perfect for buttoning her uniform shirt. She aligns the fabric, matching the rhythm of the snare drum. Maroon and yellow. Symmetrical. Familiar. The song demands movement, and she allows herself a structured sway as she ties her sneakers. Outside, the morning air in Gimli is sharp. The wind whipping off Lake Winnipeg carries the smell of cold freshwater, threatening to push her backward. She leans into the gale, clutching her canvas tote bag against her ribs. The sudden tickle in her sinuses catches her completely off guard. She sneezes violently, directly into the heavy gust of wind. A strange, metallic warmth instantly blooms across her upper lip. Kira stops abruptly on the cracked sidewalk, bringing trembling fingers to her face. They come away, smeared with vivid crimson. The visual is striking against her pale skin. Fascinating, she thinks, rubbing the slick fluid between her thumb and forefinger. The capillary walls must have ruptured from the sudden shift in atmospheric pressure. The clinical explanation is deeply soothing. But the social implications quickly invade her thoughts. She visualizes the remaining walk. Why did it happen so suddenly? People might think that I fell or something. Or that someone struck me. They will stare. I do not have a script for a bleeding nose. She quickens her pace, pressing the thick sleeve of her green sweater against her face. The rough wool scratches, but it acts as a necessary barrier. She keeps her head down, avoiding the gaze of early risers. The neon Robin's sign flickers in the distance. She pushes through the heavy glass door, the silver bell chiming its familiar greeting. The comforting scent of roasted coffee beans grounds her slightly in the sensory chaos. Jessie is already there. It is his first official day, and he has meticulously learned the layout behind the counter. He wears the same maroon and yellow uniform, his fluffy hair slightly tousled. He is restocking the ceramic mugs with quiet precision. He looks up as the bell rings. His big brown eyes widen for a fraction of a second, catching the bright red stain on her sleeve and her face. Kira does not offer a greeting. She does not make eye contact. The variables have shifted drastically, and her singular priority is containment. She walks straight past the counter, making a direct line for the employee bathroom in the back corridor. She pushes the heavy wooden door open and locks it with a definitive click. Jessie freezes, holding a ceramic mug midair. His immediate instinct, honed by years of trying to fix things for an ex-girlfriend who weaponized his care, screams at him to follow her. He wants to ask if she is hurt, to offer a damp paper towel. But the memory of Mrs. Henderson's firm voice anchors him. Don't try to force conversation with her. Let her set the pace. He slowly exhales, places the mug onto the stack, and steps back. Mrs. Henderson emerges from the kitchen, wiping flour from her hands onto her apron. She takes one swift look at the empty aisle and Jessie's deeply concerned expression. "She went straight to the back," Jessie says quietly, ensuring his voice won't carry. "She was holding her face against her sweater. I think she's bleeding." Mrs. Henderson nods, her expression shifting instantly to maternal concern. "Keep an eye on the front counter. If the harbor fishermen come in, start them on the dark roast. Don't hover near the back." She moves with surprising speed, her sensible shoes squeaking slightly. Jessie turns back toward the coffee machines, focusing entirely on the physical task. He aligns the paper filters and ensures the acrylic tray of sugar packets remains perfectly untouched. He refuses to be a source of chaos in her unpredictable morning. Inside the cramped bathroom, Kira turns on the cold tap. The fluorescent light hums a steady note that usually irritates her, but right now it is a welcome anchor. She watches the pink-tinged water spiral down the drain. The bleeding is already beginning to slow. A gentle knock sounds at the door. "Kira, honey," Mrs. Henderson's voice is soft. "It's just me. What happened?" Kira grabs a paper towel, folding it into a precise square and pressing it against her nostril. She unlocks the door and pulls it open exactly 3 inches. Mrs. Henderson doesn't attempt to push her way in. She stands patiently in the hallway. "I sneezed," Kira explains, her voice sounding flat. "I was walking, and the wind was blowing forcefully, and I sneezed directly into it. The sudden pressure differential caused a minor hemorrhage. It is highly confusing but anatomically interesting." Mrs. Henderson lets out a long, quiet breath. "Just a nosebleed, then. You had Jessie and me worried you'd taken a tumble on the pavement out there." Kira frowns, processing the statement. "That is exactly what I hypothesized people would think, that I fell. But I did not fall. The wind was merely aggressive." "The wind around here usually is," Mrs. Henderson says with a warm smile. "Take your time getting cleaned up. Jessie has the front counter completely covered. Your prep station is exactly how you left it yesterday. He hasn't touched a thing." Kira pauses, the rough paper towel pressed firmly to her face. The mention of the new employee usually triggers a sharp spike of anxiety, a dread of disrupted routines and misplaced tools. But Mrs. Henderson's factual assurance acts as a solid weight against her rising panic. She closes the door gently, leaning over the porcelain sink once more. The bleeding stops entirely after 2 minutes. She washes her hands with precise, vigorous scrubs, counting to a strict 20 before rinsing under the cold stream. When she finally steps out into the main dining area, the morning breakfast rush is just beginning. 2 weathered fishermen are sitting at their usual corner booth. Jessie is behind the counter, pouring steaming coffee into thick mugs. He does not look her way. He does not ask what happened. He simply steps sideways as she approaches, leaving her designated prep area completely open and untouched. Kira walks to her station, her fingers lightly brushing the edge of the perfectly aligned sugar tray. For the first time all morning, the erratic rhythm in her chest begins to settle into a steady, manageable beat. The diner's rhythm settled into a manageable hum, though the lingering scent of damp wool and roasted beans reminded Kira of her earlier disruption. She stood at her prep station, mechanically wiping the pristine stainless steel counter with a damp cloth. Her mind, usually occupied by counting the ceramic plates or categorizing the customers by their beverage choices, kept snagging on the unclosed loop from an hour ago. She had entered the building bleeding. Jessie had witnessed it. He had displayed microexpressions consistent with alarm, and she had entirely ignored him. According to her meticulous internal logs of social obligations, skipping a basic morning greeting under standard conditions was a minor infraction. Doing so after generating an alarming visual stimulus was categorized as distinctly rude. Embarrassment, a tight, prickly sensation at the base of her neck, crept upward. She intensely disliked the feeling. It disrupted her equilibrium. She stopped wiping the counter, folded the cloth into a perfect square, and placed it next to the sink. She needed to rectify the error to restore her baseline. Jessie was near the espresso machine, carefully refilling the hopper with dark, oily beans. He moved deliberately, avoiding sudden gestures, something Kira had noted and appreciated over the past few days. She walked over to him, stopping exactly 2 feet away, ensuring she didn't infringe on his immediate operational radius. "I need to address my behavior from this morning," Kira said, her voice clear and slightly elevated over the hiss of the steam wand. Jessie paused, lowering the bag of beans, and gave her his full attention without locking into an intimidating stare. "You don't have to explain anything to me, Kira. Are you feeling all right?" "My physical state is currently optimal," she replied, her eyes tracking the movement of a stray coffee bean spinning on the counter. "However, my social execution was flawed. The sudden epistaxis caused me to experience shame. Consequently, I bypassed standard greeting protocols. It was rude of me to ignore your obvious concern. I am apologizing for not saying hi, and I am thanking you for displaying worry. It was an appropriate emotional response to a bleeding colleague." Jessie offered a soft, lopsided smile, the tension in his shoulders visibly melting. He understood the monumental effort it took for her to initiate this conversation, carefully unpacking her actions like mechanical parts on a table. "It's completely fine, Kira. You don't have to apologize. Honestly, I'm just naturally wired to worry about people. It's a reflex for me." "A reflex," Kira repeated, testing the word. "Like a patellar tendon response, but psychological." "Exactly like that," Jessie agreed softly. "I'm glad you're okay. We've got a busy wave coming in, I think." As if summoned by his words, the bell above the heavy glass door jingled rapidly. A surge of locals, tourists, and nearby construction workers flooded the diner. The ambient noise level doubled, then tripled. Conversations merged into a wall of sound, punctuated by the clattering of silverware and the rhythmic thumping of the coffee filter being knocked against the trash bin. For the next 2 hours, they operated in a synchronized, wordless dance. Kira found solace in the rapid sequence of tasks: pulling tickets, assembling plates, aligning toast exactly parallel to the edge of the ceramic. The predictability of the orders created a functional buffer against the chaotic noise. Jessie anticipated her movements, ensuring she always had an uninterrupted path to the pass-through window. He managed the verbal exchanges with the customers at the register, his easy demeanor absorbing their impatience, while Kira remained insulated in her structured workflow. But as the morning dragged into the early afternoon, the physical demands of the shift began to override Kira's focus. A sharp cramp in her lower abdomen signaled a physiological necessity she had been ignoring for the past 35 minutes in favor of maintaining the queue. Her internal threshold shifted from manageable to urgent in a matter of seconds. The bodily requirement simply deleted her current task from her active processing. She dropped her small metal tongs onto the prep tray with a sharp clatter. Without a word to Mrs. Henderson or Jessie, she pivoted away from the counter. Her singular objective was the employee restroom. A man in a rumpled gray suit, agitated and shifting his weight, was next in line. He had been tapping his credit card against his palm, sighing heavily at the weight. As Kira marched directly past him, entirely breaking the line of service, he threw his hands up in exasperation. "Unbelievable," the man scoffed loudly, ensuring his voice carried across the dining room. "What a bitch." The word sliced through the ambient noise of the diner like a dropped plate. Jessie froze at the espresso machine, his grip tightening around the steam pitcher, a sudden, protective heat flaring in his chest. He took a half step forward, his instinct to shield her overriding his instructions to let things play out. Kira halted. Her sneakers squeaked loudly against the linoleum. She processed the auditory input, comparing the aggressive tone and the specific derogatory noun against her vast mental catalog of neurotypical behavior. He was angry because she deviated from the service script. He used an insult to assert dominance and express his displeasure. She turned around slowly. She did not look at his face, but rather fixed her gaze intensely on the knot of his crooked blue tie. Her expression was entirely devoid of malice, anger, or fear. It was simply clinical. "You are a normal freak," Kira stated. Her voice was flat, carrying no emotional inflection, simply delivering a highly accurate assessment of his chaotic, irrational hostility. Having delivered the factual correction, she turned back around and resumed her brisk walk down the corridor, pushing the heavy wooden door of the bathroom open and letting it click shut behind her. The man stood stunned, his face flushing a deep, mottled red. He opened his mouth, sputtering, looking around for an authority figure to validate his outrage. "Did you hear what she just said to me? I want to speak to the manager. That is completely unacceptable." Before Jessie could intervene, Mrs. Henderson materialized from the kitchen. She bypassed Jessie completely, stepping directly into the man's line of sight with a placid, impenetrable smile that carried years of diner authority. She wiped her hands on her maroon and yellow apron, projecting an aura of absolute calm that immediately sucked the oxygen out of the man's anger. "I am so incredibly sorry about the wait, sir," Mrs. Henderson said, her voice dripping with practiced, thick syrup. "Our girl in the back has a medical accommodation, and sometimes she just has to step away without warning. It's the nature of the business today, but let me make this right for you. Your coffee and your meal are entirely on the house this morning. Dark roast, wasn't it?" The man blinked, the promise of free food colliding with his indignation. Yes, dark roast, but she shouldn't be working the front if she's going to act like that." "We're all just doing our best to get by, aren't we?" Mrs. Henderson replied, already pouring the coffee and handing it across the counter, effectively closing the negotiation. "Jessie, grab a fresh pastry for the gentleman, would you? And let's keep that line moving." Jessie nodded quickly, using the tongs to retrieve a blueberry muffin. He handed it to the man, his movements precise and quiet. As the placated customer finally moved toward a booth, Jessie exchanged a brief glance with Mrs. Henderson. She gave him a microscopic, approving nod. Kira was safe behind the bathroom door. The routine of the diner had been preserved, and they had successfully defended the fragile ecosystem they were building together.